When my daughter told me to just sign the papers without reading them, I didn't argue. I smiled, asked for a pen, and handed her the wrong document. 4 days later, my phone showed 31 missed calls. Before I take you through this story, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. My name is Thomas Reed. I'm 64 years old, a retired accountant, and a widower. I live alone in the same modest suburban house I bought with my wife, Helen, more than 30 years ago. Helen passed away several years ago, and since then, I've done my best to fill the silence with small routines, tending the garden, helping out at the library, and keeping the house in order. My daughter, Isabella, is 32. She's sharp, ambitious, and always busy. Growing up, she was the kind of girl who lit up the house with laughter. I remember her running down the hallway in her pajamas, dragging a stuffed bear, and shouting for me to chase her. Back then, she clung to her mother and me as if we were her whole world. But things changed after Helen passed. Isabella grew distant, less patient with me, more focused on her career and her own life. She still called now and then, but the warmth had faded. When she visited, it wasn't to sit and share memories. It was usually about business, money, or some favor she needed. Still, I tried to see the little girl inside her. I told myself she was just busy, that she still cared, even if she showed it differently. But deep down, I felt the gap growing wider. The daughter who once promised to take care of me when I was old now treated me like a formality, someone she could brush aside when it didn't suit her. That was the state of things when she walked into my house one afternoon with a folder of papers in her hand. I had no idea then that her request would test not only my trust, but also the strength I had left as a father. It was a Friday afternoon when Isabella showed up at my house. She rarely came unannounced, so when I opened the door and saw her standing there with a leather folder tucked under her arm, I felt a mix of surprise and cautious hope. Maybe she just wanted to visit her father. Maybe she was finally coming to spend some real time with me. She stepped inside, barely pausing to greet me. "Hi, Dad," she said quickly, brushing past me into the kitchen. I followed, watching her set the folder on the table with a little too much purpose. I tried to lighten the mood. "You didn't call ahead. Thought you might have finally decided to surprise me with dinner." She gave a short laugh, but it sounded forced. "Not today. I just need you to sign some routine papers. Won't take long." I looked at the folder and then back at her. "Papers for what?" Her tone sharpened, almost impatient. "Dad, it's just financial stuff. Trust me. You don't need to read through it all. It's standard. Just sign so I can get it filed." My heart sank a little. This wasn't about visiting. It wasn't about checking on me. It was about business again. I pulled out a chair and sat down, keeping my eyes on her. "Isabella, I've been reading contracts my whole career. You know I don't just sign anything put in front of me." She sighed heavily, the way she used to when she was a teenager and didn't get her way. "Dad, you overthink everything. It's not that serious. Please just sign the papers. I don't have time to explain every little detail." That word, please, wasn't warm. It wasn't the please of a daughter asking her father kindly. It was the clipped, impatient tone of someone trying to rush a deal. I opened the folder slowly, and as I did, my eyes caught the title at the top of one of the documents, Property Transfer Agreement. My pulse quickened. I read a few lines and realized exactly what it meant. If I signed, I would be handing over ownership of the house, my home, the place Helen and I built our lives in. I looked up at her, and she was already watching me closely. For a brief second, guilt flickered in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a practiced smile. "Dad, you don't need to look at all that. It's just paperwork. I told you, it's nothing." The betrayal cut deep. This house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was where Helen and I raised her, where we celebrated birthdays and Christmas mornings, where I held Helen's hand in her final days. Every brick was filled with memories. And now, my daughter wanted me to hand it over without even reading? I kept my voice calm. "Isabella, why don't you tell me exactly what these are for?" She shifted in her chair, her tone growing sharper. "Dad, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I'm trying to help you. This way, things will be simpler down the road. I can take care of everything for you. Isn't that what you want?" Her words stung. She wasn't offering help. She was demanding control. She wanted to take something that wasn't hers to claim. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her explanation. "I see. You just want to make things easier." Her shoulders relaxed a little. "Exactly. You don't have to worry about anything. Just sign and let me handle it." Inside, my mind was racing. I knew I couldn't confront her in that moment. If I exploded, if I called her out, it would only drive us further apart. And maybe, just maybe, I could teach her a lesson that words would never reach. So I closed the folder gently and said, "All right, if it's that simple, then I'll need a pen." Her face lit up with relief, and she smiled the way she used to when she thought she had won. "Finally, thank you, Dad. This is the right thing to do." I watched her closely in that moment. The eagerness, the impatience, the way her eyes darted toward the page like a prize waiting to be claimed. My chest ached with sadness, but I masked it with the same smile she thought she had given me. What she didn't know was that I had already decided. If she wanted me to sign papers without reading, then I would. But they wouldn't be the papers she thought. The conflict was no longer about whether I would sign. It was about how I would remind my daughter that deception has consequences. After Isabella left that day, her papers still sitting neatly stacked in the folder, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I kept running my hand across the smooth wooden surface, the same table where she once did her homework while I checked over tax returns late at night, the same table where Helen used to set down Sunday dinner with that warm smile of hers. Now it had become the place where my daughter tried to trick me into giving up everything I had worked for. I wasn't angry in the way you might expect. The anger passed quickly, replaced by something heavier, disappointment. I knew Isabella was ambitious, but I never thought she would try to manipulate me so openly. It wasn't just about the house. It was about the lack of respect, the disregard for the values her mother and I had tried to instill in her. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, I made my decision. If Isabella wanted me to sign without reading, then I would give her exactly what she asked for. But it wouldn't be her papers. It would be mine. I went to my study the next morning and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a set of documents prepared years ago by my lawyer, David Harper. He had drafted an updated will and trust that I never finalized. The papers ensured that if anyone tried to manipulate me, they would lose their share entirely. I had kept them tucked away, not thinking I would need them so soon. But now, looking at Isabella's betrayal, I knew these were the right tools for the lesson she needed. I read over every page carefully, making sure I understood the details. The language was clear. If she signed these documents alongside me, her control over my estate would vanish, replaced by a trust that honored Helen's memory. The bulk of my estate would go toward scholarships for underprivileged students, just as Helen once dreamed. Isabella would still have a place in my will, but she would no longer have power over the house or the family assets. When Isabella returned 2 days later, folder in hand, I was ready. She came into the house with that same air of impatience, tapping her polished nails against the folder. "Did you look at the papers, Dad?" she asked, her voice brisk. I gave her a calm smile. "I did. And you're right. No need to drag things out. Let's just sign them and move forward." Her eyes lit up, the way they did when she was a child, unwrapping presents on Christmas morning. "Good. That's the smart choice." I excused myself and walked into the study. My heart pounded as I picked up David's documents from the desk drawer, slipped them into a new folder, and walked back to the kitchen. I placed them neatly on the table. "Here," I said, sliding the folder toward her. "Let's make it official." She opened it, scanned the first page quickly, but not carefully, and then pushed it back toward me. "See? Nothing to worry about. Just sign here and here." I nodded, my face calm, my hand steady. I picked up the pen and signed where she indicated. Then I passed the pen to her. "Your turn." She scribbled her signature beside mine without hesitation, her eyes glinting with triumph. "There we go. That wasn't so hard, was it?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her. For a moment, I wanted to tell her everything, to confront her with the truth, but I stopped myself. This wasn't the moment for words. This was the moment for silence, for letting the lesson unfold on its own. As she packed up the papers, she patted my shoulder lightly. "You'll thank me later, Dad. This will make things easier for both of us." I forced a small smile. "I'm sure it will." When the door closed behind her, I exhaled deeply, the tension finally leaving my chest. I walked back into the study and sat down, staring at Helen's photo on the bookshelf. Her eyes seemed to sparkle in the frame, as if she knew exactly what I had done. "I hope you'd approve," I whispered. "It's not revenge. It's a reminder. She needs to learn." The decision was made. The papers were signed. Now all I had to do was wait for her to realize what she had agreed to. 4 days later, when my phone buzzed with 31 missed calls, I knew the lesson had finally reached her. 4 days after Isabella and I signed those papers, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing non-stop on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was a wrong number or some kind of emergency alert, but when I finally reached for it, my stomach tightened. 31 missed calls, all from Isabella. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the glowing screen. For years, I had been the one chasing her, dialing her number over and over just to hear her voice. Now the roles had reversed. I set the phone down and let it buzz again. Whatever storm she had stepped into, she needed to sit with it a while. By mid-morning, I finally answered. The second I picked up, her voice burst through the line, high and frantic. "Dad, what did you do? These aren't the papers I gave you. Do you have any idea what you signed?" Her words tumbled out so quickly I could barely follow, but I didn't interrupt. I just let her panic spill into the silence in my kitchen. Finally, when she paused to catch her breath, I asked evenly, "What do you mean, Isabella? I signed the papers you wanted me to sign. Isn't that what you asked for?" There was a sharp inhale on her end, followed by a furious edge in her voice. "No, these weren't my documents. These were different. Dad, you handed me the wrong folder. I had a lawyer look at them. And do you know what they say? They say I have no authority over the house or your estate anymore. You've locked me out of everything." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of her words falling exactly as I had expected. My voice stayed calm. "Isabella, you told me not to waste time reading. You told me to just sign. So that's what I did. I signed what was in front of me." She let out a sharp cry of frustration. "Don't play games with me, Dad. You tricked me." For a moment, I closed my eyes, steadying my breathing. It wasn't easy hearing my own daughter accuse me like that, but I knew this wasn't about a trick. It was about a lesson. "I didn't trick you," I said firmly. "I simply did what you asked. You wanted me to sign without reading, and I did. Maybe next time, you'll understand the danger of asking someone to sign blind." There was silence for a beat, then her voice cracked, somewhere between anger and desperation. "But Dad, this house, everything, it was supposed to be mine. Mom would have wanted that." Her mention of Helen made my chest ache, but I wouldn't let her twist her mother's memory into justification. "Your mother wanted this family to live with honesty and respect. She never raised you to take shortcuts or manipulate people for gain. If she were here today, she'd be ashamed of the way you treated me." On the other end, I heard her breathing hard, her fury giving way to guilt. I thought it would be easier this way. I didn't think you'd notice." "That's exactly the problem," I said quietly. "You didn't think. You wanted the reward without the responsibility. You wanted me to trust you blindly, while you showed me none in return." Her voice broke into a plea. "So what happens now? Am I just cut out completely? Is that it?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself before answering. "You're still my daughter. I will never erase you from my heart. But when it comes to this house, this estate, this life I built with your mother, those things will go where they can do the most good. To a scholarship fund in her name, to people who need it, not to someone who tried to take it by deception." She sniffled, her anger now replaced with the hollow sound of regret. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought, I don't know what I thought." For the first time in days, I felt the tightness in my chest ease. "What you thought," I said gently, "was that you could take advantage of me. And now you've learned that some lessons are signed in ink. This wasn't about punishing you, Isabella. This was about teaching you that respect isn't optional, Without it, even love can't survive. She didn't respond right away. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, in a trembling voice, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad." I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. I wanted to believe her, and maybe I did, just a little. But I knew words alone couldn't rebuild the trust she had broken. Only actions could. We ended the call shortly after, not with closure, but with the beginning of something fragile. A chance, perhaps, for her to understand the difference between love and entitlement. As I set the phone down, I glanced at Helen's photo on the mantel. Her smile seemed to hold steady, as if she were reminding me that I had done the right thing. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had stood not just as a father, but as a man who refused to be walked over. The 31 missed calls no longer looked like desperation from a daughter who had lost control. To me, they looked like proof that the lesson had finally landed. After that storm of calls and the heated conversation with Isabella, the house finally returned to its usual quiet. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy with loneliness the way it used to be. It was steady, even peaceful. I had stood my ground, and for the first time in years, I felt like I hadn't been treated as someone who could be pushed aside. I spent the next morning in the garden, kneeling in the soil, pulling weeds, and planting fresh flowers. Gardening always clears my head. As I dug into the earth, I thought about what had just unfolded. My daughter had tried to outsmart me, had tried to take the home her mother and I had built, but in her greed, she had fallen into her own trap. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I had won a battle. What I felt was a mix of sadness and resolve. The sadness was for the little girl I once knew, the one who used to run barefoot through this yard, clutching a stuffed rabbit, laughing as Helen and I chased her. That girl had grown into a woman who saw her father less as family and more as an obstacle standing between her and what she wanted. That part still hurt, but the resolve was stronger. I knew I had made the right decision. Protecting this house, this estate, wasn't about money. It was about values. Helen and I worked hard our entire lives, not so our daughter could take shortcuts, but so she could live with dignity and respect. And if she couldn't show those things to me, then she had no right to inherit what we built. Later that week, Isabella came by in person. She didn't storm in with confidence like before. She knocked gently, almost like she wasn't sure I would answer. When I opened the door, her eyes were red, as if she hadn't slept. She stood there with her arms crossed, her voice quiet. "Dad, can we talk?" We sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where she had pushed those papers in front of me just days earlier. But now, her tone was different. There was no rush, no demand, no smugness, only hesitation. "I shouldn't have done what I did," she said finally. "I was wrong. I thought if I had control, things would be easier, but all I did was push you away. I know Mom wouldn't have wanted me to act like that." I listened without interrupting. Her words weren't enough to erase what had happened, but they were a start. I leaned forward and spoke slowly. "You're my daughter, Isabella. That will never change, but being family isn't about what you can take, it's about what you give. Respect, honesty, loyalty. Those matter more than anything written on paper." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I understand now. I don't care about the house or the estate anymore. I don't want to lose you." For the first time in years, I believed her. Not because she was perfect, not because she suddenly changed overnight, but because for once, she was being honest with me. That honesty, fragile as it was, mattered more than any promise she could make about money. In the weeks that followed, our relationship began to shift. She started calling me, not to ask for favors, not to rush me, but just to talk. Sometimes conversations were short, sometimes longer, but each one carried a She even came by to help me with the garden, kneeling beside me in the soil the way Helen used to. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As for me, I kept the estate plan exactly as it was. The bulk of what I had would go to a scholarship fund Helen's name, something that would carry her love for education forward long after I was gone. Isabella would still have a part, but not control. That was a way of protecting her from herself, of ensuring she never mistook inheritance for it again. Looking back now, I don't see what happened as punishment. I see it as protection. Protection of my values, my wife's legacy, and even of my daughter. Because sometimes the harshest lessons are the ones that open our eyes the widest. So here's what I want you to take from this. Never let someone pressure you into signing away your worth, whether it's your money, your home, or your dignity. Stand firm, even if it means facing someone you love, because real love, real family, is built on respect. Without it, everything else crumbles. And to my daughter, if she ever hears this, I hope she remembers that this wasn't about shutting her out. It was about reminding her of who she is and of the values her mother and I worked so hard to give her. If this story touched, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing your stories too.